Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from Chase Commercial Term Lending and New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Capital One Bank, the Wyckoff Group, Genova Burns, Giantomasi Webster, Greenberg Traurig. Additional funding is provided by grants from AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Colliers International NYC, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Foley & Lardner, Friedman LLP, Gemini Real Estate Advisors, HAP Investment Developers, Herrick Feinstein, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Chairman USRealty.com, John Katsimides, Red Apple Group, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Madison Realty Capital, Massey Knuckle Realty Services, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, New Banks, MHP Real Estate Services, People's United Bank, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Sterling Risk, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, The Continuum Company, CUNY TV Foundation, the Moynihan Group, Urban American, and These Friends.
So, you get these kids, they start in shoe shine business, then they work as a clerk in a drugstore, then they decide because they didn't want to go to the wrong high school, they go to New Utrecht, maybe I'll be a pre-law, maybe I'll liberal arts. Engineering? What do I know about engineering? Engineering, AT&T, New York Times to find a job. Find a job with this little gas company, this little company that's been around on Remsen Street all these years. And you find a job, and you don't stay there too many years. You stay there 51 years, and you make a legend of yourself and the company. And I have the legendary philanthropist, hardworking individual, author also, Bob Catell. Thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So you told me your dad at one time even worked at, he was in the Navy Yard, didn't he work? So tell me about your mother and your dad.
Yeah, well, my mother and father were married, obviously, but he was not able to get into the Army in the Second World War. So he went to work in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, I guess building ships or whatever they did in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Don't have too many memories of him because...
Yeah, he passed on when you were young.
Yeah, I was 8 years old.
Now, you did tell me you had a memory of him. He worked as a bartender at the Palisades Amusement Park in Palisades Park, New Jersey, right?
That's correct, in Cliffside Park, New Jersey. And I do have a memory of him working there. My mother took me and my sister. My sister was very little. And he was working in Palisades Park as a bartender.
So you grew up in Brooklyn. We would call it Borough Park, Sunset Park over there. And your mother worked in the clothing business and millinery.
Right.
And from millinery, she would even waitress to make some money. And so how did you get the first job with the shoe shine on 9th Avenue and 39th Street?
That's correct. Yeah, well, because my mother had to support my sister and I, she had to find various jobs to do. And I guess today you might have called her a seamstress. She took in washing. She did whatever it took to support my sister and I. So trying to make a few pennies to bring into the house, I came up with an idea. I took a wooden box and I made a shoe shine box out of it.
Now, did you have the metal?
I had the metal, yeah.
You had the metal piece?
They had the slanted so you had people's shoes could put on it. And I went up to the subway station at 9th Avenue and 39th Street.
Now, this was elevated, right?
No, this was elevated. It's where it came out of the ground,
Right,
actually. It
right.
came out of the ground. This was the West End line, as I recall. and I used to give people coming off the subway shoe shines, 10 cents a shine.
And
Sometimes,
once in a while,
once in a while, I get a quarter tip. It was like Christmas time, but I made a little bit of money that way.
now you went to public school?
I did. I went to public school, yes. PS 131 on Fort Hamilton Parkway and 43rd Street. Lived on 43rd Street and 9th Avenue at that time.
And what did you do during the summers? You know, besides working in the pharmacy?
Well, I went to, when I got a little bit older, I delivered orders from a Packers supermarket for a while in the summers. But then
Packers, oh, I remember.
Remember Packers? It was on 46th Street and Utrecht Avenue, right next to the Lowe's 46th Street movie theater. But when I got a little bit older, I actually worked as a lifeguard. 3 summers I worked as a lifeguard.
Brighton or?
It was in Coney Island, Bay 16th Street in Coney Island. So for 3 summers, I worked as a lifeguard.
Now, you said when you were supposed to go to high school, you lived with your aunt and uncle. Why?
Well, where I lived on 43rd Street and 9th Avenue, the high school that I should have gone at that time was called Manual Training High School. It's now John Jay. And it didn't have a great reputation. And my mother, being a single parent, she worried about me. So she moved me in with my aunt and uncle who lived on 79th Street. And so that's how I got it to go to New Utrecht High School.
Now, that was the uncle who had the Kalish or the?
No, that was a different uncle. That was my aunt and uncle, Hilder and Nat Chapman. That uncle was actually in the dry cleaning business. He had a dry cleaning store on 86th Street. Kalish was another uncle on my mother's side, Louis Kalish.
Bakery.
He had Kalish's Bakery on 13th Avenue and 49th Street.
Now, so you're at New Utrecht, and you were a baseball player, right?
I played some baseball. I was on the baseball team.
You were
not really good enough to make it to the next league. I didn't. Unfortunately, when I went to City College, I didn't make the baseball team. But one interesting little tidbit is we did play against Lafayette High School, and on the team that we played against was Fred Wilpon and Sandy Koufax. So we didn't know each other in those days. Fred and I have gotten,
but later on, you and Fred,
we reconnected. Yeah,
you reconnected over there.
They used to beat us most of the time.
What happened with the guidance class?
Well, I was pretty good in math and science, so I thought I wanted to be an engineer. And you had a college advisor advising you. And I was fortunate enough to get into City College, which was free at that time. My mother couldn't afford to send me. And my college advisor in high school talked me out of engineering. She said, you won't be able to make it. The kids from Brooklyn Tech and Stuyvesant, they've had a lot more math and science, so you won't be able to compete with them. So I went into liberal arts, into pre-law, my first year.
And what happened at pre-law?
Well, I was in pre-law, and I took some nice courses in English and writing and literature, which was good, but I still wanted to be an engineer. I used to see the guys walking around campus with the slide rules on their belts, and I said, I want to be an engineer. So I went to the dean of the engineering school. They asked about transferring from liberal arts to engineering, and he said, people don't normally do that. They usually go the other way. They gave me an aptitude test, which I passed, put me on probation, and I guess the rest is history.
Now, when you were at City College, how did you get the job working at the shoe store on Fifth Avenue?
That's, I was looking for a summer job when I first got into City College, and I actually walked the streets in Manhattan, going from store to store to store, looking for a job. And I walked into Ansonia Shoes. At that time, it was located on Fifth Avenue between 39th and 40th Street.
Cross street from Lord & Taylor.
That's exactly right. And they were looking for a stock clerk, so they hired me.
So wait, but you elevated, you went from stock clerk to a shoe salesman.
Eventually became a
salesman. Now, which was very valuable because the world of your life took a lot of salesmanship into that.
That is true. That was my first lesson. We were selling women's shoes. Think about that.
What kind of prices were they?
Well, Ansonia was sort of mid-range. It wasn't the lowest.
They weren't
price.
I. Miller. They weren't
I. Miller.
They weren't A-Spec.
That's correct. They were right in
the middle over there.
But it was very interesting selling women's shoes because they would probably, some of them would try on 10 pairs and not buy a pair. Some of them would go in and buy 5 or 6 or 7 pairs.
So you're at City College. You're working as a shoe salesman part-time to make something. And then your last year at City College, because it took you 5 years because of the pre-law, you get a job at AT&T at downtown Manhattan.
Yes, it was the AT&T building on 32 Chambers Street down at Canal Street. It was testing long line circuits. I used to put a signal on a circuit and see if it got from New York to California. That was my summer job because I was getting ready to graduate and I figured I should try to get a job, something related to the engineering field. So that was a summer job.
So how come you didn't stay at AT&T?
Well, I was offered a job at AT&T when I graduated. And AT&T at that time was Ma Bell. It was huge. It was 400,000 people, and I was an engineer literally in the basement of 32 Chambers. And I just said, in a company this size, I'll probably never have an opportunity to really advance. So I happened to see an ad in the New York Times for engineers at the Brooklyn Union Gas Company.
I realize that you and I both grew up in Brooklyn, but you know, you knew the name of the Brooklyn Union
Right.
Gas Company, an old line, established company that you had no relatives in the engineering business, you had
Nope.
nothing. So what was the job in the Times?
The job in the Times, they were hiring what they called, at that time, they were calling junior engineers. I was an engineer, so I went, I applied for the job, had an interview.
With this gentleman?
As a gentleman, Samuel Green, who was the chief engineer of the company. And I guess they liked me, so they hired me as a junior engineer.
Now, your first job as a junior engineer was what, fixing meters?
Was in the meter repair shop, that's correct. I guess they wanted me to learn business from the ground floor, literally. So I spent a year in the meter repair shop as my first job.
Now, how do you get involved with the Michael Quill and the Teamsters Union at that time?
Well, Michael Quill was the president of the Transport Workers Union. The Transport Workers Union was the union that represented the employees of Brooklyn Union. So in the meter repair shop, I got to know the union delegate. His name was Peter Derwin, very smart, savvy guy. And
But you were an exempt job, so you
I
were...
was not in the union, but I had to learn how to work with the people in the union. They felt a little threatened by me as a college kid. What is he doing? He's going to take jobs away from us. But I told them that was not, I didn't want to spend my entire career in the meter repair shop.
So from the meter repair, what was the next job?
The next job was more of an engineering job. It was actually putting pipes in the ground in the street, burying the new gas lines, installing the new gas lines in the streets of Brooklyn and Queens.
Now, that was in Queens. Where was that?
Well, we did, Rochdale Village was one of the large projects that we built the gas main into. Rochdale Village was kind of unique because it had its own generating plant. It generated its own electricity.
But you were involved with Rochdale,
Yes.
right? What you do over?
Well, I was really involved in installing the pipes in the ground to feed Rochdale.
So were you literally out there at the pipes?
I wasn't digging the holes.
No.
I was supervising.
No,
the
but you were
people that-
supervising
Yeah,
on
yeah.
site.
Oh yeah, yes.
Now, during this period of time, because you started at Brooklyn Union in what year?
Started in Brooklyn Union actually in 1958.
In 58. In 1961, your sister is no longer a dependent.
Right.
And you get the phone call, greetings,
Greetings,
from
yes. Uncle Sam.
Uncle Sam at Whitehall Street.
At Whitehall, that's right,
Whitehall
Whitehall Street. I had to go down to Whitehall.
Went to
for my
Whitehall
physical.
Street, and then you,
I got inducted into the Army.
but you didn't go for 2 years.
No, I got into something called the Critical Skills Program because I was an engineer working for a utility company that qualified me for a 6-month program. So I didn't have to go in for the normal 2 years. So I went and did my basic training at Fort Dix.
And then Fort
did
Benning?
my advanced infantry training at Fort Benning. And then I came back to Fort Dix and I spent the last 2 months as a supply clerk.
And you never did the 5 years?
No. I was very fortunate. I didn't have to do the reserve, active duty. So after the 6 months, it completed. Now, I was on standby reserve. If there had been a war or something, they would have taken me back
So
in.
this is 61, 62. The next step after you got involved with Brooklyn Union, was this when Brooklyn Union was doing the Cinderella program?
About that time, yes. And
So what was the Cinderella program?
The Cinderella program was an idea of a vice president in Brooklyn Union, Fred Ryder, who, that was the time the borough was kind of going downhill. It was not doing very well. And there was a lot of really good building stock, these old brownstone buildings. And Fred came up with the idea that if people spent a little bit of money, they could paint these buildings and really make them sort of showcases. So he came up with the Cinderella program. The first Cinderella house was on Berkeley Place in Brooklyn. Brooklyn Union actually bought that house and refurbished it, showed people what could be done. And then we had a program, we'd give people like $5,000 to fix up their house. We also encouraged them to put a gas light in front of the house as well to kind of dress it up.
But one of the things that Brooklyn Union was, they were the forefront of creating energy in other areas. Right. And that was something that you were heavily involved with.
Yes. We were a gas company, but as a gas company, we were limited in what we could do. So we did get into a number of diversified and unregulated businesses.
Now, when did you become an AVP or a VP?
I became an AVP, Assistant Vice President, in 1971. And
So was 71 when you were thinking of going to Hawaii?
well, yes, I was.
I mean, the whole history could have changed. You know, it could have been, you know, AT&T, Brooklyn Union, then Hawaii Gas.
Right. Yeah, I was going through some difficult personal times in my personal life, and I thought maybe it was time to make a change. So I looked around, and the gas company in Hawaii was hiring engineers. I was actually interviewed, not in Hawaii, but in New York City, and I thought of leaving and starting a new career in Hawaii.
So how did you decide to stay?
Well, a senior vice president in the company, and actually two senior vice presidents, a fellow named Gene Lunty and L. Larson, who I reported to, I told them I was thinking of leaving, and they convinced me to stay. They said, Bob, look, we understand you're going through some difficult personal times. As long as you do your job here, we think you have a bright future. So I decided to stay, never went to Hawaii.
So let's talk a little before you became, you know, the president CEO. How was the next progression of Brooklyn Union?
Well, the next progression, I became an assistant vice president, and at that time, natural gas was in short supply. So one of the senior vice presidents, Mr. Gene Lunty, put me in charge of special projects, looking for other gas supplies for the company. And one of the projects we did at that time was to produce natural gas or methane from the landfill in Staten Island. So that was one of the special projects that I got on. And then I got involved in the regulatory arena and the sales arena. I was fortunate.
Right, you were heavily involved in the sales arena.
That's correct.
You know, dealing with the transit workers and other things,
Yes.
and also because you were involved with the people over there. You became a senior vice president,
Right.
in the 80s.
That's correct.
In the 80s. And you really, one of the things that people don't really know, some people know about, you were heavily involved in the resurrection or the renaissance of downtown Brooklyn. Exceptionally community leader. And you were over there in the Renaissance, and downtown Brooklyn was like they were talking about the Bronx, was in trouble.
Right.
So what did you and Brooklyn Union do at downtown
Well,
Brooklyn?
it started with the Cinderella program, and we went from residential into commercial and industrial. And then we encouraged developers to look at downtown Brooklyn. And the first developer that came to downtown Brooklyn was Forest City. They built what we called the Morgan Stanley building. This was before Metrotech. We were also working with the borough president, Howard Golden, at that time, to really attract and identify Brooklyn as a great location for back office. Not for
You were the head of the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce,
I was,
and you were many others, but I know at this
Right,
time you were the
right,
head of the Brooklyn
right.
Chamber of Commerce.
So as part of that, we worked with the business community in Brooklyn. We had some large companies that were there. We had, at that time, New York Tell. We had Con Edison, of course. We had the banks, Manny Hanny, Chemical Bank. We worked with them together to really attract business to downtown Brooklyn.
When's Metrotech take place?
Well, Metrotech really takes place in the late 1980s.
Now, as someone said to me, without Brooklyn Union's commitment, or Bob Catell pushing this commitment, there wouldn't have been my friend Josh Muster's hotel, because I believe you guaranteed a certain number of rooms for the Marriott at the Brooklyn Bridge.
We did.
And then you also were able to be the main lead tenant at Metrotech.
That's correct.
So when is it that you become president of Brooklyn Union?
Became president and CEO in 1991.
Now, so it's 1991, and you're at Brooklyn Union Gas, and somebody goes to work in the HR department, a former monk?
Well, he was he was a former Catholic priest, a fellow named Kenny. Moore, and he went to work. I guess after 15 years in the Catholic priesthood, he wanted to leave and do something else. He came to work for Brooklyn Union, our human resources department, and we put him in charge of a couple of projects. And he and I kind of connected.
So how did you meet him? Because this is how you became an author. I mean,
right.
One of the interesting things that you did with Kenny was the funeral, corporate funeral of Brooklyn Union Gas. What was the...
Well, Brooklyn Union was a gas company and was also trying to become an energy company. And we were really trying to change the culture of the company. After being a 100-year-old gas company, how do we now become an energy company? And Kenny at that time, we started working closely together. And he came to me one day and he said, Bob, I recommend we do a corporate funeral. And I thought he was crazy. I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, well, think about a funeral. You lay to rest a loved one. You have nice memories of the past, but then you move on. And he said, we need something symbolic to let the people in the company know that we're a changed company. So then I went to talk.
Somebody felt that you may have been losing it.
Well, I went
right?
to talk to the other officers of the company. They thought I was crazy. But we actually did it. We got about 400, we couldn't get all of our employees, but we got about 400 of our employees in the auditorium. Kenny put on his priestly robes. We played some music, and he actually went up on the stage and first started by saying, "What is it you liked about the old company?" And he put that up on cards, and then he burned it. And then he said, "Okay, what is it that you see that's going to be exciting with the future of the new company?" So it was a symbolic thing, but it kind of spread through the company that we really did something like this and wanted to change our culture.
But in essence, it really was part of the resurrection and the change of Brooklyn Union from a small gas company to an energy company,
Right.
to making electricity, to converting people from fuel, from oil to gas and all the rest. Now, during that period of time, you decide that you want to expand the company a little further. You're geographical. So,
Right.
So where's the first expansion?
Well, the first expansion was out on Long Island. In the 3 boroughs that Brooklyn Union served, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island, we had 80% of the market. So there wasn't a lot of room for
You had
growth.
that other company, Con something.
Con Edison, well, they did the electricity, and they did gas in the Bronx and Manhattan. So we looked around, and the most logical place for us to expand was onto Long Island, where only 25% of the people use natural gas for heating. Tremendous market opportunity. So we went out and met with the then chairman of the Long Island Lighting Company, a fellow named Bill Catell. And originally he wasn't too interested in talking to us. But when Governor Pataki came into office, he had promised that he was going to reduce electric rates on Long Island by double digits, and he was going to municipalize the local utility, LUPCO. And that's when I approached both the governor's office and Bill Catell and said, why don't we do a public-private partnership rather than municipalizing? And that's how that all started.
So that's the logo acquisition is what, 96?
We closed in 98. We started in 96. The
96.
discussion took us 2 years.
How do you take away the name Brooklyn Union and you created KeySpan? So what was the KeySpan idea?
Well, it's an interesting evolution, I guess. The name, the Brooklyn Union Gas Company, was well respected and well renowned, but we were no longer only just a gas company. So we had to come up with a new name. And, you know, you do research and look, and most of all the good names are taken. Then we had a consultant, and they came up with the name KeySpan. And KeySpan really came from, we were identified with the Brooklyn Bridge, which had a span, key, the key to solve your energy problems. So that's how the name KeySpan was born.
Is this at the same time when KeySpan, that's how you go back to your friend who played at Lafayette, and there's a new minor league ballpark being created, and you became the name for KeySpan Park.
Right. That actually happened a little bit later, but yes, Fred Wilpon, who I mentioned earlier, who we had gotten to be friends later in life.
Now, didn't you play on the field of KeySpan Park?
I did. Well, actually threw the first ball out. On opening night, there were 3 people that threw the first ball out, Mayor Giuliani, Fred Wilpon, and Bob Catell. But when they brought minor league baseball to Brooklyn, they were going to build a field, he approached me and he said, we're looking for naming rights. And I said, Fred, don't call anybody else. It's going to be KeySpan Park.
Now, when did you and Kenny and the other co-author write the CEO and the Monk?
Wrote the CEO and the Monk probably in, I would say, early 2000, the early 2000. You know, after the Loco transaction, after the Boston Gas acquisition, we wrote it at that time.
How do you end up meeting someone in London one day?
Well, okay. At that time, we had done the Loco transaction. We acquired Boston Gas. We had gotten to be a pretty sizable company, about a $7 billion market cap. And we had about, between electric and gas, we had over 12,000 customers. And I was in London one day, and I decided to call up the CEO of a company called National Grid, having no idea that we were eventually going to be acquired by National Grid. But I just felt that I should know. His name was Roger Irwin.
Because you've always been involved with the Gas Association.
Right, right. And we had a relationship with British Gas. So I called up Roger Irwin, and I said, I'm Bob Catell, CEO of KeySpan. I'd like to meet you. We had coffee together, and then just kind of kept in contact for about the next couple of years. And then National Grid at some point decided they want to expand their U.S. operations. They approached us. And being a CEO, you have to try to do what's in the best interest of your shareholders. And after some negotiations, they offered a nice price to my shareholders.
So when did that take place?
The
formal
The closing was in 2007. We started the discussions prior to 2005. We filed for regulatory approval in 2005. It took us about 2 years to get all the approvals. The deal closed in...
And you become chairman and CEO of National Grid of America.
I became the U.S. chairman for National Grid and the vice chairman of National Grid PLC.
Right. But the kid who worked, as everyone, anyone reads, you did work those 6 to 10 hours, from 6 in the morning to 10 at night. not 6 to 10 hours a day. You know, you couldn't be stopped over there. So you basically, you left the company in what,
2009.
2009, and you've kept yourself so involved in philanthropic and other endeavors. Let's talk about some of the organizations, and especially Cristo.
Okay.
One of your...
Yeah, the Cristo Rey High School. Yeah, when I was getting ready to retire from National Grid, I connected up with the dean of the engineering school at Stony Brook, and we endeavored to build, we eventually did, an energy research center.
So you're the chairman
I'm the chairman of the advisory board at the Advanced Energy Research Technology Center.
And Cristo Rey?
Well, the Cristo Rey High School is a Catholic high school in Brooklyn that provides a faith-based college preparatory education to low-income inner-city kids. Through some of the philanthropic activities that I had been involved in, I was introduced to Cristo Rey Brooklyn. It's about 4 years ago now. I went to visit the school, fell in love with the concept of giving these young inner-city, low-income kids the same opportunity that I had. And the key to the Cristo Rey program is the work-study program. So these young people actually work 1 day a week in real jobs. The companies pay. The money goes to support the school, the scholarships to the school. And these young people have a tremendous opportunity to get into great colleges and to have a great life. So it's a very...
Let's talk about family, children, wife, and tell me grandkids, because we always, you got to tell the names of the grandkids, otherwise it's not...
Okay. Well, I'm a very fortunate man. Married 42 years now to my current wife, Joan. I have 5 children. I am very blessed with 14 grandchildren.
You want to go quick? 14?
We'll go quick. We'll go right from the top. The oldest is David, who's going to celebrate his 16th birthday this Friday. He has a sister, Haley. That's my daughter, Carla. Then my daughter, Donna, who's a doctor. She has 2 little girls, Bianca and Tessa. Then my middle daughter, Laura, has 3 children. She has a Clover, a Storm, and a Tristan. And then my youngest daughter, Erica, has 7 kids. Caitlin, Ryan, Edward, I'm going to get them all, Maggie, Erin.
They all watch the
Robert,
show.
And Brendan.
And that's
the 14.
So for the kid who wanted to play baseball, who, you know, started with the shoe shine, who fortunately for the New York Times found a job, who literally has taken care of the borough of Brooklyn, no question, the city of New York, and the community. Thanks for being here today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.